What is dog-to-dog socialization? Why is it important? And why do we need it?
Whenever I do a behavioural consultation, one of the first questions that gets raised by just about every client is, how do I socialise my dog correctly so that it can do everything that I want it to do or take it wherever I want to take it as an adult dog? And that in itself is a really good question, but in order to understand it, we need to break it down into a couple of the smaller components that relate to it, because it's not a straightforward question to answer. The first thing that we need to address is the question of just what is socialization. And for those of you that are not familiar with the term, socialization isn't about how to deal with inanimate objects. It's about how to deal with living things. So it's how to get my dog social in all the situations where I'll be putting it around something living and expect my dog to have a positive association, or ideally a neutral association with things, so that it won't overreact or react badly towards them. The second thing that we need to understand is that everybody's expectation of how social they want their dog to be will vary. And I'll give you a really clear example of this. There are two effective extremes that we need to understand. My approach with all of my dogs is probably a little extreme compared to other people. When I walk down the street with my dog, I don't want it to run across the road or run towards people or other dogs expecting to play or engage or have effectively a high energy or even a low energy encounter with them. I want my dog to walk down the street with me and go, yep, that's a person, that's a dog, that's a cat, that's a possum, and ignore them completely. Pretty much the same way that when I walk down the street, I'm friendly to the people that I meet, but I don't have a burning desire to interact with them socially. I save that for my friends and family, and the same thing goes for my dog. He socializes with friends' dogs. He socializes with dogs that I know and that I trust, and I put him around so that I know that every time that I expose him to that situation, he's going to come out with a positive outcome. The far other extreme is that some people want their dogs to be social butterflies, that they should be comfortable meeting and greeting every single dog on a walk, or they should be comfortable taking their dogs everywhere and be socially comfortable or neutral to other people and dogs across the board. Now, those are two varying extremes, and what you'll find is every single dog will fall somewhere between those two extremes. You might err towards the side of having little interaction, or you might err towards the side of having a lot of interaction. And before we can actually target that, we need to understand what exactly it is that you want your dog to have in terms of socialization ability, and then we can structure a training program based on that. So if we look at socialization as learning how to interact positively, there's a couple of things that we need to firstly understand that they are going to be detrimental into the socialization experience. The first thing is understanding that off-leash dog parks are effectively the complete opposite of socialization. So those of you that haven't seen my video on off-leash dog parks, I'll put a link up on the top left-hand corner of this video, and there'll be a link in the description below that goes into detail as to why I discourage people from attending off-leash dog parks. Effectively, they are uncontrolled behavior. And the problem with uncontrolled behavior is it sets an expectation in your dog. So if your dog is exposed to every time it sees a dog and it wants to play and it wants to get highly aroused, on your day-to-day walks, when your dog sees another dog, the same thing will happen. That dog will trigger excitability in your dog, and it will just want to be excited around them, which is not necessarily a good thing, but we need to understand the cause and effect of all behavior. So have a look at that video. It'll explain it a bit more. The next thing that we need to try and understand is, well, what is the basis of good socialization? And if you look at children in a structured environment like a school program, they are in and around children in a playground setting. They are in and around other children in a structured class setting. And they are also in and around other children in a sporting sense. So effectively, they get exposure to other children and adults in a class environment, in a playing environment, and in an educational environment, all with guidance and structure. And they learn how to control their arousal. And therein is the key to good socialization. It is about trying to control arousal in dogs to meet your expectation of how you want them to be. So if a child effectively goes through a good school environment where they develop confidence, self-control, positive exposure, and they learn to tolerate things, They are the key ingredients to making your child well balanced. The same thing applies to a dog. And the best way to achieve that, regardless of whether you're doing private one-on-one training or group training, the best way to achieve this is in a group setting. For example, a good obedience dog school that actually has qualified trainers, that has a proven socialization program that helps get your dog exposed to lots of other dogs in a structured environment to learn how to behave, how to manage stress, how to manage arousal. And the benefit of this is your dog in that group setting is getting exposed to many, many different types of dogs of different breeds, different excitability levels, different competency levels of handlers, different confidence levels of handlers. And that helps the dog effectively understand how the greater society of dogs actually make the dog react. Because when you go for a walk, you'll see dogs that are aggressive, dogs that are calm, dogs that are excitable, dogs that are timid. And if the dogs have actually seen this in a day-to-day context, in a learning process in a dog school, they have then good background knowledge to apply that to your walk on a day-to-day basis, which is really important because the dogs can only practice what they've learned, and they either learn excitability or they learn control. And it is better to teach your dog control and to be effectively neutral to triggers to actually help your dog deal with life better as an adult dog. In order to get this to happen, the earlier we start the dog, the better. So if you're really serious about this and you have a puppy, effectively the first 14 to 16 weeks is when we should be targeting this, regardless of your vaccination, because most good dog training centers will actually be able to help meet the requirements of socialization and still make sure that your socialization strength is maintained. So I have a video on this. I'll put a link to it up in the left-hand corner of the screen, but also in the description below, on how to get your dog to be socialized in the context of those first critical development periods. This is effectively the first 14 to 16 weeks, which is really important. So in that time is when we should be exposing the dogs to just about all the distractions that we want as an adult dog. So we need to pre-plan, well, what is my life going to look like as an adult dog? And how am I going to get my dog to achieve the benefits of exposure in this really small window of development so that when my dog is an adult dog, it's been exposed to all the things positively. So this video will help explain it in great detail. I won't go into too much detail now, but effectively we need to get the dog exposed to each and every stimulus, whether it's dogs, livestock, busy places, public transport where there's different types of movement. Those are all really important things to develop, and that video will explain it to you in great detail. And the benefit of this is, once your dog has been really well socialized in this period, as the dog gets older, we don't need to do a lot more socialization. We need to do a little bit of maintenance period. And I'll give you my dog as an example. The first 6 months, I spent a considerable amount of time getting my dog socialized, really well socialized, to lots of different dogs and lots of different people, because I would need to use him in the context of dog training. And throughout the rest of his life, he's only ever caught up with other dogs maybe 2 or 3 times a year for about half an hour to play. And that has maintained that level of socialization. So not only is he not getting ongoing exposure to socialization, but now in the context of training, I put him in and around dogs that effectively want to hurt him. Big aggressive dogs that I'm using him as a therapy dog to help them bridge the gap and get a little bit better. And he's actually able to tolerate it. So once you've actually socialized your dog really well in these critical periods, it gives the dog carryover effect through life to basically not weaken what's been done in terms of socialization, because it was done at a critical period. And my dog hasn't really been further socialized, yet he's actually able to tolerate many, many dogs that would make other dogs quite intimidated or reactive. So the benefit of early period exposure is really, really hypercritical to get your dog balanced in real life. So in summary, in order to have a really well socialized dog, we need to cover a few things. The first thing that we need to do is start socializing your dog as early as you possibly can. Those of you that have got puppies, the first 14 to 16 weeks are incredibly important, which is why getting the dog into a group program is incredibly valuable for the dog, because we teach the dog the correct way to be exposed to living things in the most developmental period of the dog's life. Yes, we need to pay attention to the vaccinations and the vulnerability, but that is a risk that's really worthwhile taking. The second thing that we need to do is to minimize exposure to environments that produce uncontrolled behavior, especially in the developmental periods, because the dogs will learn how to associate other animals with how we teach them. So if we teach them to be calm around other animals, when we see other animals as an adult dog, they'll have learned a correct behavior. If we teach them to be aroused around other animals when they see dogs as an adult, it triggers excitability. The last thing that we need to do is, if we've got an older dog, is to actually try and go back and fill in the gaps in terms of the socialization. We need to target what's missing, and the older the dog is, the harder it is to remedy, but effectively still group exposure is going to be your best option going forward. And more importantly, try and understand what it is that you want to achieve out of your dog. Do you want your dog to be the social butterfly, or do you want your dog to be the dog that just walks down the street comfortable in its own skin and is not threatened or excited by things in the street? It just goes, yeah, I've seen it all and I'm quite comfortable. So those are the important components that you need to understand with socialization. If you have a trainer that you're using, ask them to help you achieve these goals. But I guarantee that if you follow this structure, you're going to have really well-structured, well-balanced dogs. Thanks again, guys. Have a good day.